The energetic part of me that ended up in this other dimension was the eternal me, was the portion of me that never dies, just like it is for everyone else, just like it is for you, for anyone listening to this. That portion of us inside, which is our spark, our soul, our inner essence, you can kill the body or you can destroy the body, but you can't destroy the inner essence because I left and I was still aware that I existed. So that is the hope that I want to give to anyone who hears this, is that yeah, things may be tough here. We may not like exactly everything that goes on, but uh, when we leave, we will be okay.
We never die.
We never die.
My guest today is Philip Hasheider. For 6 minutes, Wisconsin farmer and writer Philip Hasheider was dead. He met all the requirements: heart not beating, lungs no longer breathing, skin an ashen color turning blue. He was lifeless and flat on the floor. This extraordinary story of his near death experience is about the events on an early October morning leading to his sudden cardiac death and what he experienced during that time away from his body. Through no request or fault of his own, he had suddenly, in an instant, become an expert on dying. Philip, that is an extraordinary intro, and oh my gosh, to in an instant become an expert on dying. Um, what a pivotal moment in your life.
Oh, it was. Looking back now, a few years later, it became a what I would call a demarcation line in my before life and my now life. It was a very uh, pointed episode, and thankfully, I survived with the help of a lot of people I didn't know. And the big thing for me is I was eventually rejoined with my family. Plus, I also, over a couple of years, was able to understand what happened and understand why I survived and to be able to write about it. So my experience, I've learned, is pretty easy to explain from a medical or a physical standpoint, but it's much more difficult to find words to explain what I experienced in another dimension where human vocabulary is not part of the language. There are no words. Everything is transmitted through a energetic consciousness. And to explain what that is took me a long time, first to understand and then to write so that I could understand exactly what I was feeling, and then write it in such a way that other people could as well. So one of the intentions of my book, which was kind of an afterthought, really, it wasn't what I set out to do initially. One of the consequences of that has been using the words intentionally to try to capture the vibrations that come with each word and form them into basically my story. And it let those words convey the things I felt and things I saw and the things I experienced while I was in another dimension. Uh, so people have asked, well, what happened to you? Well, being a farmer in Wisconsin, I also, my wife and I pasture graze beef. And so we have our farm totally in pasture for that. And anyone who's worked with livestock or any large animals, well, not even large animals, they can be small ones as well, understand that animals have their own sixth sense as we would understand it. They are very perceptive as well if you pay attention to them. So part of what I did was every morning go out to walk amongst their cattle. Uh, when you do that, you not only acclimate yourself to them, but they acclimate themselves to me. So it's a give and take. And by doing that, they remain, I don't want to say your friends, but they remain calm enough that I could walk amongst them, talk to them, scratch them, at least they don't run away from me. So that particular morning was different. And ironically, I never picked up on it until much later. Uh, but that morning, I walked out and they were lying in the center of the field. And usually I could just walk up and get up right next to them. That morning, one of them saw me coming. I was about 300 feet away at that point. And one of them saw me, jumped up, looked at me, pricked its ears forward to see what was going on, and in a split second, took off running at high speed across the field. Stopped about 900 feet away, turned around and looked at me, still staring, keeping an eye on me. Well, all that commotion created uh, a sense amongst the rest of we had 24 head out there. They all got up, looked at me, and then they took off running across the field and joined the other one. And I thought it was really unusual, but just kind of shrugged my shoulders and went back because I saw there was none of them that I needed to attend to. There was no physical problems that I could see. So, I just left. Well, that morning I had intended to go to our local hospital's fitness center for a workout, which I had been doing for the previous 8 months, 3, 4 times a week, in an effort to get my blood pressure down. And historically, I never had high blood pressure, but over the past year, it had slowly escalated. And my doctor advised me to get on a fairly active regimen to try to bring it back down. It did a little bit. Um, so I drove into our town, a local town, and went to the center, went downstairs, changed, came back up, greeted the staff members that were there who I'd gotten to know over those 8 months, stretched, exercised a little bit, and then went to the arm curl machine. I did my 20 arm curls, and one of the staff members came by and said, "Well, keep your back straight." And by that time I was finished, so I got up. And it was at that moment something was wrong because I looked at my forearms because they were both tingling. Like when you lie on them, if you fall asleep and you wake up and they've gone to sleep, both of them felt that way. And that was the last thing I remember for a period of 8 hours. Well, in that split second moment, I was told I collapsed to the floor right next to a staff member. And it was in that precise moment that all of a sudden I realized I'm somewhere I was not before. Not my physical body, but a formation of me in a spiritual sense. And where I found myself was on, the best I can explain, it was like a raft, a small boat, if you will. And I was floating on these waves that were coming towards me, consistently coming towards me. And while I was sitting on this, they came to me and passed through me. And I thought, well, that's really interesting because I had never experienced anything like that before. Well, at least not that I could remember. So I was sitting on this raft, just slowly motioning, and these waves were coming through me. And at that point, I looked at what I thought was my hand. both the hands, because that was the last image I had when I had left, or when I just before I collapsed, was looking at my arms and my hands. But my hands weren't solid. They were like woven into energetic filaments that created what appeared to be a hand. And I thought, well, that's really unusual because I can actually see through it. And at that point, I just was looking around and I saw all these other floating objects out in every direction I could see. There were some above me, some beside of me, as we determine uh, directions. Some below me. I mean, it was like leaning over when you're in a lake and you're looking into the water to see what's going on, except there was no water. There was no water waves coming to me. These were all energetic threads that I could actually see coming in. Well, at that point, I just decided to look up to see what was in front of me, and it was the most astounding thing I have ever seen. Uh, Certainly here, but it was this gigantic globe that filled this theater that I was in. This huge, well, it's the largest theater, outdoor theater I'd ever been in. Uh, it was golden and it was glowing, and it was the size and intensity of 10 million suns, if you will. But yet I could reach out and I could touch it and not get disintegrated by it. And I kept staring at it and watching all of these energetic waves coming out of it and passing me and going behind me. So as I was looking at that, I wasn't, at that point, I wasn't sure what it was, but it just seemed like uh, it was something I had seen before, or this was a place I had been at some point. But, it's like deja vu. You've been somewhere where you think, well, I've been here before, but you can't quite put your finger on it. It was, if I could use that human language to explain the feeling I had at that moment, that was as close as I can come to it. So I'm looking up at this giant golden orb, and it's pulsing with life. And all I felt at that time, the only thing I felt was love. And that's such a small word for what I experienced. I mean, we can understand human love and how it wells up inside of us when it's such a dynamic emotion that we have for another person or other people. Um, but this was what I was feeling at that time when I saw it. And then looking around at all the other floating entities, let me use that word, uh, all I could understand at that moment was that this was the source of all creation. This was the divine creator. Let me use the word God. You can apply any word to it you want, but it was the source of everything within what I was experiencing. There were no dimensions in this theater. There was no ceiling. There was no sides to it. There was no bottom to it. As we understand how you package something up into a box, there was no box. I mean, this was just an infinite amount of energy coming from within an infinite amount of space. So at that point, I realized I probably should look behind me just to see what's there, because all these waves kept going through. And I turned around, and the best I can explain is that I was looking into infinity. I was seeing eternity. And it was like if I had this big magnifying glass and it became a sheen of uh, like a veil of translucent energy that acts like a magnifying glass. And it was really interesting because the farther I looked, the clearer it became. But there was nothing to stop where I was looking. It just kept going. And it was at that point when I noticed all of these different universes suspended around me. And by that I mean, if we take, imagine now that we're going to take our universe and everything we know about it, all the stars and all the dark matter and everything we have within the seeable universe that we understand to be where we exist. You take that and you compress it down to a single sheet of paper, the width of a single sheet of paper, okay? Then you take another universe and you do the same thing to that one and you suspend it right next to that one. And you do that to the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And you keep going in a linear direction. And then you do that in a vertical direction with all these different compressed universes suspended in this eternal space. In each one of those that I saw had an energetic thread running from it back to this source, which was pulsating life through this thread into that universe. Which is why I knew at that point that this was God. This was the source of everything we know, everything that has been, everything that will be, and that I was a part of it. But it wasn't just me. I mean, this was not a solo trip for me. There were others there that I can't say that I met them, but I could see them and acknowledge that they were there as well. So this place was not just specifically for me, it's also for other people, entities, life forms that we can't imagine in our limited mental ability. So while I was experiencing all of this, there were still people back at the fitness center trying to revive me. I didn't know that. I did not know that I had died. It didn't feel that way because I felt such love. I just felt like, wow, this is home. And I didn't even think about my body back at the fitness center. I didn't even think about my family. Um, it may sound like, I wasn't aware of them, but it wasn't part of what I experienced that I still remember. Now I'm gonna take a sidestep here for a second because I think what the best way I can explain it is that if you have a computer of, say, just as an example, 12 gigabytes, say my brain is 12 gigabytes, and all of a sudden I'm exposed to all of this infinite knowledge, this overwhelming sense of what is knowable, and all the answers to everything is here. And then I try to bring that back as what, 50 terabytes, maybe. What would happen if I tried to infuse that back into my brain? I think it would probably crash it. So at this stage, I do believe that I was only given enough memory of what I experienced that I could safely bring back here. And maybe in some point down the road, I will experience a lot more of it. But what I've written about in my book is what I remember to this point.
Over time, does more of your experience develop as you come to understand bits and pieces of it?
It's not that I start to remember a lot more stuff. A couple of things have come back, but it's understanding. that's what I've been given, is an understanding to try to explain what I experienced. Now, and I'll come back to the question of why. Um, while I was away from my body, experiencing this dimension, there were 11 people back at the fitness center trying to get my heart started again. And the ambulance crew came from across the street. The one staff person I collapsed next to uh, started CPR right away. So I had a lot of help very quickly. And the short answer is that I ended up with two blockages that had knocked my heart out of rhythm, and I did not have any damage to my heart even after two electrical shocks to get me going. So it took them, and I have this from the medical reports, it took them a little over 6 minutes to restart my heart. So it was during that 6 minutes that I was gone. And then all of a sudden, I wasn't gone. I left. And I understand that that's when I came back to my body. Now, part of understanding what happened to me, uh, because I've done a lot of research for other books, so I know how to do interviews with people I've never met. And each one of the people that worked on me were willing to sit and talk about what they did to help me. Now, they knew, and this was a year later, but each one of them, without an exception, each one could remember a year later exactly what they did to help me. Now, they couldn't remember and didn't know what the person next to them was doing, but they were so focused on what they did, they could remember that. And it imprinted on them, I think partly because of the energetic transference from a different dimension that they had a hands-on working on me, that it did flow into them as well. The thing that really caused a lot of them some confusion is why, after they did get me back, I looked so good. They could not understand. And each one of them said, well, when you started breathing again, you came back to normal. So I only know this because I had talked with them. Of course, I ended up going transported to a major medical facility, ER room, and my wife was called. Our son and our daughter were called, and everybody showed up in the ER room. I did not know that until later. Uh, the ambulance crew said that I was talking to them, joking with them as we were driving the half hour to get to the medical center. I have absolutely no recollection of anything for until about 8 o'clock that night, when best I can explain it, I phased back in and I started to finally recognize people, and I couldn't figure out what my wife was doing at the end of my feet while I was on this gurney. I couldn't understand why our son and daughter were there. I couldn't understand why I was in this room with all these doctors. I mean, I was just exercising. What could possibly have put me here? So it was really confusing, and it was confusing for a long, long time. But when I got over a little bit of that confusion over the next couple of weeks, the question kept surfacing: why? Why did this happen? First of all, and then later came the question: why did it happen? Where it happened? Because an hour earlier, I could have still been out in that pasture if it had happened to me there. There would have been nobody around for another 6 hours. And, I wouldn't be talking with you, is what I guess the upshot of it is. So why did it happen? Why did it happen where it did? And why did it happen when? Those were the three questions that nagged me for a long, long time, but I had absolutely no answers until later.
When you were in the pasture with the animals and they ran away from you, do you feel that they knew something was going to happen?
I think they knew something was different. Looking back on it, at the time, again, I was pretty oblivious to what happened. I just thought it was, well, that's really strange, and then turned around and left. Maybe if I had stayed, I could have assessed it a little better. But no, I do think animals having that sense that there's something different. I mean, I've seen it so many times over my years of working with livestock. They can sense something is happening. What it is they sensed, I'm not sure, although I have since been told by someone who is more prescient in understanding animal behavior that they must have noticed something behind me, like an aura, um, a I don't know, find another name for an aura, something like that, that struck them as something they hadn't recognized before, and it may have frightened them, not knowing what it was.
Animals always seem so intuitive to me. It seems like they can, I don't know, read the room a little bit better than humans at times. So yeah, that makes some sense that
Yeah.
they noticed something was different anyway. And while you were there on the other side, did you feel like you were still Philip, or did you feel like everything had dissolved away and you were just energy, or maybe a combo?
Well, I recognized the outline of my hands as me. Now, I couldn't see the rest of me, but I could feel an energy. I call it being energetically marinated, which is what it felt like. And it was so peaceful. It was liquid love, if you will. And that is what I recognized. Not so much my name, because that is something that's given to me in this dimension. In that dimension, it was the expansion of my innermost part, my inner essence, my soul, if you will, that had expanded to make this form that I could recognize as what was me. Um, which brings me to a point that I now understand that our bodies are more than the sum of its parts. I was Philip standing next to the arm curl machine, standing up. I was also Philip lying flat on the floor, not breathing. What happened? What is the difference? Well, the difference is when I was standing, my soul was still there. When I was lying on the ground, it was in another dimension. And when they restarted my heart, my soul had to come back for it to exist. Otherwise, they would have eventually given up if I hadn't restarted my heart, or if they hadn't been able to. So the energetic part of me that ended up in this other dimension was the eternal me, was the portion of me that never dies, just like it is for everyone else, just like it is for you, for anyone listening to this. That portion of us inside, which is our spark, our soul, our inner essence, you can kill the body or you can destroy the body, but you can't destroy the inner essence, because I left and I was still aware that I existed. So that is the hope that I want to give to anyone who hears this, is that, yeah, things may be tough here. We may not like exactly everything that goes on, but uh, when we leave, we will be okay.
We never die.
We never die. Our essence doesn't. Our bodies do. I've likened it to an energetic superhighway. Okay. At some point in my eternal journey, I decided that I wanted to come into this dimension. And we come here to learn. We don't come here to be punished. We come here to learn, and we do that. So in 1951, I took the energetic superhighway off ramp and came down into this dimension, which is a lower density. I was born of my parents. I grew up with them. They taught me. I have now lived a little over 72 years and have experienced this dimension, except for 6 minutes. And when my body uses up all of its fuel, which it will, just like everyone else, I am going to get back onto that energetic on ramp to the energetic superhighway, and I'm going to go to another experience. And I know that's true because how could I possibly have experienced that dimension if I wasn't there? So this is, yeah, we don't die. Our essence doesn't get destroyed. We are always called back to the eternal dimension that is filled with the love and spirit of the God force, the divine creator, the source of all creation, whatever you want to call it. Now, in conjunction with this, one of the things I did see coming out of this golden globe of God energy were all these little sparks coming out and zipping off into infinite number of directions. And I now understand that to be the entities, the souls, if you will, of other people being created. I mean, we are all created within this globe, this energy, and we are all part of the DNA of that God energy. And we take this with us as we leave the source and go to wherever we go. So my energy leaving here is still that same spark that came down 72 years ago into this dimension. And I think we are given this gift to experience this dimension because we, as humans, this is our species. That's how we come. And we can experience in a tactile way, we can experience in an emotional way. And all of that is something that we couldn't do without a body. Now, I think as an entity, if we come here, just as a spirit entity, we could experience something, but not in the same way of substance that we can with human body. So this is our time here to use to learn a lot of lessons and take them with us. And I think that everything we learn here goes with us to wherever we go for our next experience. And I do think we remember people that we've met and loved here, and that we aren't lost, they aren't lost, we are just on another journey. So that in essence is what I understand now.
Do you think that we have soul groups or soul families that maybe we travel all around this whatever, I don't know a word to explain the infinite, but that we stay connected with throughout all of our existence?
Short answer, yes. Am I able to explain it? I'm not sure. But I do believe that we experience a multitude of things. I do believe there are family groups, if you will. Why not? because we have an infinite amount of time to experience an infinite number of configurations of who we uh, experience out there. I mean, so infinity and eternity is a very difficult human concept to wrap your head around. I mean, I understand that. I was able to experience it, and it's a gift. Can I fully explain it? I'm not sure, but I know it's there. And when you think of a space that has no time, it has really no boundaries. I mean, it's eternal. Uh, Humans are, we are conditioned to understand beginnings and ends. That is our human condition. But it's more than that. We are just in a small portion of what our existence has been. Now, I can't tell you, what other people's existences were, but I do believe that there is some familial, as we understand family configurations, which also takes you to another point, is that that's why we're all connected. That's why we are all of the same DNA. And that's why we are not so different as the person sitting next to you on the bus or driving in the car next to you. We are as connected to them as anything, but we have been taught in this dimension that we need to be separate. Well, there is no separation in the eternal or the infinite or in the God spirit. There is no separation. And when we learn that, I think we'll all be better off.
From what I'm gathering, is that we, at least for a period of time, continue on with consciousness of our own being, that we are, um, you are Philip, I am Tia, maybe not with a name, but we have a sense of individuality. And then you touched on that we go to experience other experiences, other places. Do you think that we come back to Earth, or do you think there's just too many possibilities out there, and that maybe we just continue on experiencing other different dimensions and different universes and different planets, and maybe even things that we can't even explain with words?
Oh, I think that's absolutely true. If I did not believe my experience as what it was, um, because I've been asked if I thought I was just dreaming or hallucinating. I don't believe that, because when you have a dream, and each one can think about this in their own terms. When you have a dream, or when I have a dream, I generally can't remember it. And if I do remember it, it's something that varies. It changes from when I remember it one time to when I remember it another time. With my experience, it has not changed one iota from what I first remembered. Now I'm hoping that I can add to the memory and like supplement it with stuff I finally remember. But what I have remembered has never changed one bit. And I know that it's true because I can feel it. Anytime I sit and think about it, I can automatically get myself back to that dimension. And it's gotten to the point now where I don't even have to think about it. I just see it in the background of everything I'm looking at. So the distance between this dimension and that dimension is, there isn't any. It's all part of what we are in with that, because our universe here is part of that dimension anyway. So it's all filtered in through this mosaic uh, fluid energy that is coming from this God source. So we're immersed with it. So I think we can experience other places, other dimensions. I think that's certainly within the realm of possibility. But one thing I want to come back to is that when we do lose someone, a family member, a friend, an acquaintance, or whatever, I do believe that because we had that energetic connection with them in the first place here, that becomes embedded in our soul somehow. Now, I can't explain exactly how, but I do think we take that with us, and that's what attracts us once we get to this other dimension. And that's why people say they see family members because of that attraction. Now, I never did that I recall at this stage. I don't remember seeing anyone. I don't remember seeing angels. I knew I had some guides. Uh, and it was only it was about 6 months later when I was finally introduced to them, but not in a way like we're talking right now. It was just a energetic flash that was a confirmation that what I had experienced was true, and that means more to me than anything I could ever write on paper because I know that what I experienced is true because of that. And it came after I was formulating a question of, is this what I did experience? And it came back, yes. And I needed that confirmation for a couple of reasons. One, I didn't want to be deceived. And in turn, I did not want to deceive myself. And in turn of that, I did not want to deceive someone else with what I had written as being a false narrative. So it was very important to me that that confirmation came.
You talked a little bit about you knew that realm or wherever you were was not a dream. Do you feel like this, our experience that we're having right now together in this world, is more dreamlike than where you were when you died?
No, I think my feeling is that we experience it as humans because that's our species, and that we have these internal emotions, and I don't think we lose that. I can't explain how we don't lose it, but I know that it's imprinted on us.
You have had this experience many years ago. How has that shaped your life moving forward?
That day being a demarcation line, yes, I can look back and can see the changes. Uh, Physically, I'm probably in better shape than I was for quite a while. Emotionally, I'm more in tune to my family and certainly my wife. Uh, Intellectually, I've been able to understand a lot more stuff of what lies beyond because I mean, previous to my experience, I did occasionally think about death. I mean, when you work with livestock, you have dead stock, as they say. I mean, animals have this irritating habit of dropping over on you for no particular reason. It's not that you become accepted to it, it's just something that is part of what we do working with livestock. It's part of life in the same way with us. Uh, what we do is as real as what I experienced in that dimension, only in a different form. Well, I think what's an illusion is more what we want to grasp and grab a hold of as thinking is important. I think that a monetary gain, I know we have bills to pay, just like anyone else. I mean, I wasn't given a free pass just because I had a near death experience. I have to live uh, in the same economic dynamics as anyone else. So, I have to make a living as well because of our economic structure. Um, but I don't think that great wealth is is something that is required. I mean, it's fine if you have it. I mean, to use it in whatever way you want, I suppose. But I don't find that as an attraction. Um, fame. I mean, it's an illusion. It's here today, gone tomorrow. It's just like, so there are things here in this life that I consider window dressing. And now, particularly now, that have no attraction to me, for me whatsoever. So I try to stay as true to myself and what I think needs to be done and how I react to people in a very more gentle way. Because what's the point of hardness and violence? I mean, there is none. It's an illusion that gives you power, but it really diminishes a person who pursues
Did you come back with any gifts
it.
besides
It, it's
besides
that's
the
in,
experience itself?
yeah. Well, that was a pretty nice gift. But I wouldn't suggest anyone to have a sudden cardiac death to have a near death experience. I mean, that's not something I would promote. Um, I haven't become psychic that I'm aware of. I know people. I should back up. Prior to my collapse, I did not even. This is part of my naivete. I did not even know there was such a thing as a near death experience. Um, I didn't even know there were groups available, that you can talk with until afterwards. Now, when I was recovering, somebody had mentioned about a near-death experience, and I thought, okay. Uh, I didn't really talk about it to anyone for a while, um, but as I got asking the question of why this happened, I had to pursue it. So I learned about people who had had these, but during that time, I had been making notes of what I remembered, writing out little things that uh, was a way for me to explain it to myself. And finally, when I did talk to someone who and told them my story, who was a mentor, a writing mentor of myself, uh, he said, "You really need to write about that because there are people that could use that." And it was at that point that I decided not to look at any literature of NDEs or anyone else's experience until I had actually gotten mine down on paper because uh, I did not want my experience to be influenced in some way by what somebody else had experienced. Because I don't think that we are all going to have the same experiences once we leave here. I think each one is going to be an individual experience because we're individuals here. Um, so it was at that point, after I had finally completed a first draft, uh, that I went back and looked at a couple and listened to a few, and I was struck by the similarities. I mean, it was anyone who's out there listening who's had an NDE will understand the similarities uh, between those who have experienced it. Not that others can't experience the same thing by still being alive, but for those who have had that experience, uh, there are a lot of similarities. So I had stayed away from it.
I like that that you try to keep your experience as pure as possible because I've experienced that myself where I've done research and then the lines begin to blur a little bit no matter how hard you try to keep them separate. So your story is pure and you have written a book that details or outlines your experience so that you can um, help others. Tell us a little bit about your book and where can we find that?
This is my book, 6 Minutes in Eternity, which relates to the 6 minutes that I was gone. Uh, it's available from Amazon. It's published by Lisa Hagen Books. And so it's readily available in audio and I believe Kindle as well. Um, one, if I may go back just a second, in the final answer to my question of why, which took me roughly 8 months, 9 months to get to, happened one night. And uh, it was when the next morning at the breakfast table, Mary, my wife, said, do you remember what you said last night? And I had this blank face. I said, no, what did I say? I was afraid I said something not very kind. And she said, well, you talked in your sleep, which I didn't know I did, but apparently I did that night. And she had kept a notepad on her dresser beside the bed. And she said, well, I wrote it down. And I said, well, okay, what happened? She said, well, you sat up and you started shaking your head. No, I don't want, no, I don't want to do that. No, no, I don't believe it. I don't believe it. And I said, well, what happened then? She said, well, I asked you, what don't you believe? And you said, I don't believe why I came back. And she said, well, why did you come back? And she said, I told her, well, I was sent back to be a conduit of hope to those who don't have any or don't think there's any. And she paused and I said, well, what happened then? Nothing. You laid back down and went back to sleep. And that was it. So at that moment she explained that to me, I instantly knew why I was back. I was to be some sort of hope for people who don't have it. Now, that's not an ego thing, but it is what has really defined what I've been doing the last year and a half. So uh, that is a portion of what I try to explain in my book, and I try to take people through in a fairly chronological order so they can follow the journey. And I'd be pleased if they take the journey with me because they may find themselves in it as well.
It is a beautiful purpose, and you're doing a phenomenal job at it just by sharing your story. And your book is incredible. It helps so many people, probably more than you'll ever know. Thank you so much for coming back, because I know that's probably the ultimate sacrifice, is to come back once you've experienced those intense emotions of love. So you came back to share and be a service to others, and gosh, we all appreciate that so much.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And we could probably spend another hour discussing that whole aspect of it because there were, uh, moments after I was back that I wasn't sure I wanted to stick around because of what I had experienced. And once I got over that, yeah, it's been good.
Well, I'm glad you're still here, and I'm so glad that you took the time to. I know you're busy, but you took the time out of your busy life to come and talk to us today, and that means the world to me. Are you afraid of death?
Not a bit.
Not a
Not a
bit.
bit. I mean, when I was younger, I was. I had several really close calls when I was younger, and it did frame that I was afraid to take risks. And that may have turned myself into more of an introvert to just protect myself. Plus the fact living on a farm as a youngster, I could avoid people pretty much because you're out there a lot by yourself. But what I've learned is that the, death is nothing to be afraid of. We may not want it, uh, it'll eventually happen, but it's not to be afraid of. But in the same sense, I want others to realize that means you don't have to be afraid of life either, that you can engage, you can love, you can uh, do a lot of things, maybe some that aren't enjoyable, but it is, uh, you don't have to be afraid of it because whatever happens here is not the end. I mean, we're going to just keep going on and on and on. You may not believe that, but give it time and you'll understand it as well.
I stand by that 100%. That's part of my message that I want to get out to the world, is There's no death, so there's no need to be afraid of it. And by not being afraid of death, you don't have to be afraid to live either. Don't take it so seriously. It's just
That's
we're here
exactly
to
right.
experience and have a great time, and that's it.
Mhm.
Probably other things too, but you don't need to be so nervous about everything. Everything doesn't have to be perfect.
No, no. There are only opportunities, and the ones we don't take are the ones we typically later on regret. So grab the opportunity, whatever it is. It may not seem great at the moment. I wasn't awake enough to understand that I had collapsed. Had I been, I might have thought, well, this probably isn't a good thing. But it turned out to be a life changer for me when I came back. Um, so I'm grateful, certainly grateful for the people who saved me, and I'm going to give a shout out to all EMTs and emergency people, the ambulance crews. I live in a rural area in Wisconsin, and we have volunteer EMTs. These are not paid people. So I'm sure there'll be people who view this who also live in rural areas that have volunteer services. Uh, Support them. They're worthy of your support. If it hadn't been for them, I wouldn't be here. But they gave of themselves, and that's really a gift. And so, yeah, whatever you can do to support them, I wholeheartedly uh, promote.
They are true heroes in our communities, especially the volunteers, because they do that just out of the kindness of their heart. They have other lives that they're living, jobs and families. And I grew up in a family. My dad was a volunteer firefighter for our community. I grew up in a little tiny
Mhm,
town in Michigan, and I remember the siren going off in the middle of the night, and he had just gotten home from work maybe a couple hours ago, and he'd get up and head on out and do his duty and come back and get maybe 3 hours of sleep before another double shift at work. So
mhm,
they work really hard and they do it from their heart. And so
mhm.
thank you. Thank you for that shout out. If my viewers wanted to reach out to you, if they had any questions for you, is that okay with you?
Sure. I'm on Facebook at uh, uh, P. Hasheider Books, and also I have a Gmail account at Philip Hasheider Books at gmail.com. And it they may have to look up the spelling of my name, but it should be easy to find.
I'll have a description down below with the spelling of your name so everyone
Okay.
will be able to find it there. So
Okay.
thank you so much, Philip, for joining me. I really, I can't thank you enough. You've been an absolute pleasure to spend some time with this morning, and I hope that you have a wonderful day.
Well, thank you, Tia. It's been an absolute joy for me to speak with you and to your audience. And I wish you well and all of those who end up viewing this.